My name is Crystal Rodriguez. I am the Chief of Staff to the President, and I'm also the Chief Diversity Officer for Buffalo State College.
My name is John Torrey. I'm an Assistant Professor of Philosophy and a member of the Africana Studies Unit here at Buffalo State College.
My name is Amy McMillan. I am the Director of the Muriel A. Howard Honors Program at Buffalo State College, and I'm a biologist by training.
My name is Ata Sise. I'm currently an Associate Professor and Chair of the Political Science and Public Administration Department.
My name is Anne-Marie Franchik. I am an Associate Professor of Journalism here at Buffalo State College.
My name is Amitra Wall. I am Associate Provost and Professor of Sociology at Buffalo State College.
I define free speech as the freedom to express opinions, thoughts, and ideas, free from fear.
Without fear of retaliation.
Without fear of being persecuted.
We're not going to put boxes around what you're allowed to say.
I have that right to say and voice my opinion.
And when you look at the Bill of Rights and you look at the Declaration of Independence and you look at the historical behavior, a lot of the conflict that began and ultimately became the American Revolution was rooted in the inability to express ideas and the inability to really have freedom of expression.
As a scientist, if we could not talk about what we discover and we could not be honest about what we discover, then how does science progress? How do we learn more things if we can't talk about what it is that we learn? Whether or not the country or the people that you're talking to want to believe it, whether or not those people care about it, I think you got to be able to talk about it.
Part of free speech to happen is the ability for us to engage in conversations that are sometimes very uncomfortable.
Civil discourse takes free speech to another dimension. Free speech is expressing your opinion. Civil discourse is using your opinion toward an end, toward a progressive end.
The goal of the conversation should be really to enhance mutual understanding of points of view.
We live in a civil society in which not everyone is the same.
How else are we going to get our society to move forward in a progressive, positive way, if not to include people's unique and sincere ideas in a mode of communication?
It would be a boring place if we all thought the same way.
And they should be able to have genuine, meaningful engagement so that all sides are able to be heard and taken seriously, so that as a community, people can figure out what kind of steps they want to take to move forward for whatever issues are important to them.
Some of the key ingredients of this is having the ability in a civil discourse is the ability to listen. You have to listen, and you have to respect the other view, even if you are not in agreement.
Often in civil discourse, you have to be willing to walk away from the table and not having won anybody over, and walk away and agree to disagree.
When you're angry and you're passionate is when you are the most connected to your emotion, right, about that topic.
If you're offended and you're angry, there's nothing wrong with expressing that.
You can still be kind. You can be angry, but you can be kind.
I have moments where I have to really, practice the count to 10, and sometimes that 10 has to turn to 20. And taking deep breaths, being very mindful.
And you can say, I absolutely don't agree with you. I am not going to accept your premise. I'm not going to go where you're going with this.
I can give an example. I got into a conversation, a civil discourse with a law school colleague who thinks that it's okay or thinks that it's actually a freedom of expression to have the Confederate flag in the workspace. I, of course, disagree with that. And he and I were talking, and I said, even if you don't believe or share my belief that the flag represents some racist views and values, it certainly represents some treasonous ones. And so he didn't agree, and he thinks that it is a cultural icon of cultural times, and it represents a region. And we walked away from the table, neither of us winning the other, but at least having listened to each other and understanding our position.
If the person is willing to listen and engage in that dialogue, then I take the time to understand that person's perspective. And hopefully that person will understand my perspective, so I don't just immediately get upset and angry.
The social media echo chambers are real things, and internet echo chambers are real things in such a way that you'll find facts that only reinforce your beliefs, or I shouldn't say facts, but information that will only reinforce your beliefs, and you'll find information that will only discredit those who you disagree with. Well, that doesn't foster a great environment for having discourse, because it effectively is, I'm right, you're wrong. It's tough to come into a conversation if that's the stance.
You really have to know yourself, where you stand, and I think you have to have a tremendous amount of respect for a diversity of opinions. After all, that makes up the United States. I have gotten emotional a lot of times, I have to admit that, but my emotion sometimes is in defense of people being able to express their views. I'm a veteran. I served in the United States Navy. And I feel like, you know what, I've sort of put my life on the line for people to be able to express their views, and I want them to. And the problem does become when I'm saying something offensive to you and they're fighting words. I should not say things that incite some type of violence.
We need to rein in free speech and civil discourse when it's harmful, physically hurtful.
You're not allowed to engage in free speech that is libelous or slanderous. And of course, those type of documents or communications that are protected by, for instance, classified information or dictated by contract. If you and I engage and we have a non-disclosure agreement, obviously I don't have a defense of freedom of speech because I entered into a contract that limits my speech. Those are all important limitations.
It's time to, sit down and have the crucial conversations that we need to have, the difficult conversations, the confrontational conversations that we need to have. But in order to do that, there has to be a level of respect.
Civil disobedience is another necessary tool to actively get into spaces like being on the streets and protesting to let people know this can't stand.
American history has had wonderful, moving instances of civil disobedience.
I had I have it here, two quotes by Martin Luther that I wanted to share with you. One of them, he said, an individual who breaks a law that co-signs tell him is unjust and who willingly accept the penalty of imprisonment in order to arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice is in reality expressing the highest respect of the law. On the other hand, another thing he said is one has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws.
You can change people's notions. You can bring attention to an issue if there is civil disobedience. So yes, there is a time and there is a place, and people should be able to do as such.
I absolutely believe that civil disobedience should be exercised. And I really can't say whether or not it's right. As an attorney, I'm not recommending that people break laws, but civil disobedience, we know throughout history, has had a place. Certain shifts would never have happened without civil disobedience.
Science would not progress without civil disobedience. Galileo was put under house arrest because Galileo told the truth about what he knew about the solar system. The Catholic Church didn't want to accept that. But he kept at it, right? He said it. He said, here's what I've learned. Here's what I know. And they put him on house arrest for the rest of his life. That was disobedient.
I have been engaged in civil disobedience, and I think it's important. But one of the things that I'd like to stress is that having been in movements and seeing things, they're very strategic and they're very planned. They're not impetuous, and I want to explain that. In engaging in civil disobedience, you are making a conscious decision to break a law, or to not adhere to a law. And you have to make that decision. In the civil rights movement, and even in some of the organized movements that I've been a part of, we have actually had talks that had lawyers at the table, that had money people at the table, where we discussed someone's perhaps, we don't put this person in the forefront because they have a criminal record, but this one does not have a criminal record. Why do we discuss that? Because if you're going to be subjected to charges, they may be enhanced depending on your criminal background. We also look at, what are the criminal charges and what are the possible punishments? If there's going to be an arrest, there's a plan in place for bail. All of these things strategically are talked about. It should never be an impetuous thing. So I think there is a place. I think that it can be monumental. It can be phenomenal in moving along certain conversations, but it has to be strategic.
I think personally and as a country, I think we need to grow and we need to go back to the basics and we need to learn how to listen for the sole purpose of just hearing someone out. Because words say one thing, it's just understanding why they are saying it. We need to find their story. We need to connect. We need to connect with one another.
A recent example that just impressed me tremendously was having to do with the racial protests that were happening in Buffalo. A high school student, teenager, he and his friends felt that they wanted to do something toward the racial injustices they saw it. He wanted to name or designate a street in Buffalo Black Lives Matter. So he took this intention and he lobbied his county council member and got it into a proposal that went to the council president, and the council took it up and is acting on it.
I think we're seeing people who are more courageous. They're engaging in civil discourse. All lives matter versus Black Lives Matter. Well, why? They're both true statements, but why are we on whatever side we're on and engaging in those conversations? And those are actually conversations as the new chief diversity officer that I want to bring on campus. I don't want to bring the safe people on campus, if I can say that. I want to bring people on campus that will ignite thought, that will ignite emotions, and that will discuss points of view that are very firm. And I think we need that.
It's a matter of being able to listen, because the key thing in the civil discourse is respect and listening. I have to have the ability, I guess what we call it, we have to be big up. You have to big up, big up, to allow myself to hear the things that you might tell me that will make me very uncomfortable. But I'm willing to break down with you so that we can go through that uncomfortable path to hopefully come out on the other end better.